So Gen Z reportedly doesn't want to see sex on camera. They don't want to turn on a TV show or watch a movie that inundates them with graphic sex scenes. And on top of that, they're also disinterested in romance themes in their entertainment in general. This is according to a new survey from UCLA's Center for Scholars and Storytellers, and we've talked about their results before. This has been consistent for years at this point. Back in 2023, they also found that teens want less sex and more portrayals of platonic relationships on screen. And at the time, Jimmy Kimmel talked about it on his show, and he was like, I'm so out of touch. I love turning on Game of Thrones and whipping my dick out. Ha ha ha.
Is the idea here, like, why does it have to be one or the other as far, like, why do you have to not want, sex scenes, but also only want to see platonic relationships? You can have relationships where people are romantically inclined and people who are couples. It just, you don't need to show that stuff.
Well, so often it's coupled together. You can't have romance on TV without sex on TV, weirdly.
Which is stupid.
And that is a stupid precedent. And they found that once again in 2024, teens want to see more friendship on screen. This is consistent again in 2025. The emphasis on friendship and common experiences extends into the respondents' narrative preferences. 32% said they most wanted to see relatable stories on screen, more so than fantasy or aspirational stories. They most wanted to see stories about people with, quote, lives like theirs.
Can I ask you a question about that then? Okay, so you kind of brought this up earlier when you were talking about like superheroes versus, down to earth or gritty story, like realistic stories. Like maybe this is just like a personal preference, but like, and it goes to the idea of like representation on screen, but there's very little in the way of stuff that's like me that I would want to watch on television. And I'm not talking about people in like, I don't need to see people with like Fortune 500 CEO jobs or anything like that. But I do want to see stories about people who live in a different world than I do.
I think that Gen Z is just expressing that, I mean, the statistics bear this out, sex isn't a part of their lives. Like, this is true. They're less sexually active than any other teen or young adult generation thus far. So, of course, they find it unnerving that characters that are supposed to represent their demographic on screen are living lives that are totally foreign to them.
I guess I feel like, to me, the best in the way of television when we're talking about the genres that I like, which are like procedurals and episodic TV, are the type of shows where a main character will oftentimes enter into different subcultures. Like in the police shows, it's like there's a, like, we watched an episode of High Potential where it's like there's a murder at a content house. And it's like, so they're like constantly going into different environments, things that I would never, know anything about. But like, we've been rewatching Necessary Roughness in the show, The Therapist. She has like clients who are all part of different professions. In one episode, it's a race car driver, and in another one, it's like an anchor for a major news network. And it's her dealing with the struggles of those patients. None of that has anything to do with me, but I find that far more fascinating than if I had to watch a story about some relatable person who's like my age and has similar struggles to what I have in life. I don't want that.
20 from Darren Moscow. Maybe relationship trauma should be expelled from the body by twerking while being grounded upon Mother Earth instead of drugs.
We did a segment on that at one point too.
And we have another from Russ of the Frozen North. This reminds me of that clip from The Simpsons, the episode Itchy, Scratchy, and Poochie, where the focus group of kids is asked what they want from their Itchy and Scratchy show.
Yeah, so, I mean, like, I guess kids just have different interests these days.
The 14 to 24 demographic, by the way, this is a poll that covers age 10 to 24.
So why were they asking 10-year-olds if they want to see this stuff on
I don't
TV?
think they asked all the same questions to different age groups, but to be clear, this is not just a poll covering the interests of Gen Z, because Gen Z is people born before 2012 in this survey. Yeah. There are plenty of Gen Alpha that they also surveyed here. So the 14 to 24 demographic showed significant preferences for stories about friendships. Specifically, 59.7% said that they want to see more content where the central relationships are friendships. So maybe they're saying there can be romance, but they don't want it to be the entire driver of the plot. 54.1% said that they wanted to see portrayals of characters who aren't interested in romantic relationships at that point in time.
So
54.9% wanted to see more different gender friendships on screen, and 49% said they wanted to see same gender friendships. So it's about equal on both sides. With those on-screen friendships, respondents also showed a desire to see healthy conflict resolution. And furthering these wholesome desires, romance ranked third to last on a list of topics that youths wanted to see explored on screen. 60.9% said that they wanted to see romantic relationships depicted as more about the friendship between the couple than sex. 48.4% said that there is too much sex and sexual content in TV and movies. And the most interesting part of this,
I don't
toxic relationships and love triangles ranked among the most tiresome or uninteresting tropes for young viewers.
Yeah, but The Summer I Turned Pretty is somehow the biggest show on TV.
The popularity of The Summer I Turned Pretty flies in the face of this trend. No, it's not just millennials watching that show. I know for a fact that a lot of Gen Z women were watching The Summer I Turned Pretty, which is entirely about a toxic love triangle and underage drinking and sex. So I don't understand how this is reflected in the ratings. Maybe it's just because there aren't other options being offered to them. And this says, for decades, Hollywood has turned to the teen and young adult markets as the arbiters of cool and trendy tastes. And for just as long, it has tried to appease that crowd with movies and shows centered around sex and scandal. They name some examples of Where the Boys Are in the 60s, Porky's in the 1980s, American Pie in 1999, and Superbad in 2007. All are quintessential movies for their respective generation of teens, and each increasingly raunchy. But now the tides are changing. The top answers to what is your favorite show or movie include Stranger Things, Wednesday, SpongeBob, and Spider-Man.
Yeah, you can't make the raunchy comedies anymore because they're considered problematic.
Yeah. They also included the top 25 rated favorite shows and movies for Gen Z here. Stranger Things, Wednesday, SpongeBob, Spider-Man, Family Guy, The Vampire Diaries, that's an old one. The Summer I Turned Pretty is number 6. Breaking Bad, interesting because Breaking Bad doesn't have any sexual content in it. It's only implied because it was on network TV. K-pop Demon Hunters was also ranked at number 9.
Supernatural at number 10. Supernatural was started. Just think about that. Started in 2005.
They're watching a lot of old content. Dexter, Superman, I'm guessing they mean the new Superman movie, Squid Game, The Walking Dead, Tom and Jerry was interesting. That must be like the really young crowd. Friends, Ginny and Georgia, The Rookie, BMF.
Isn't BMF the show about the record label?
Oh, I don't remember. Okay. Rick and Morty, Game of Thrones. That also, again, has so much sexual content. I guess that they just put up with it. Naruto, Jurassic Park, or the Jurassic World franchise as a whole. Bob's Burgers, and Coraline at the bottom there. So that whole section was about their distaste for sexual content in their entertainment. Thank you, guys.
That's a very eclectic list of stuff.
Yeah, and they're going back into the libraries of all the streaming services because it seems like the old content is just as relevant, if not more, than the new content.
Yep. Like I said, I go through and I watch old episodes of... Yes, thank you, guys. I go back and I restart like old shows like Law and Order Criminal Intent, which was on in like 2001. And I just rewatch episodes of that. And
that goes for Gen Z and like all the generations. They're going back and watching old shows.
Like, it's hard to believe, like, given how much crap people give me about like watching boomer police procedurals, to see The Rookie on there, because that's basically what that is. It's just a newer version of something like that.
So overall, they say this shows that youths are craving relatability and authentic representation across a myriad of metrics as they relate to media. Again, this was ages 10 to 24. And they, okay, so they say that there were a few distinct trends. One of them was that, contrary to the assumptions of older generations, Gen Z and presumably Gen Alpha as well, are still heavily interested in traditional media. They're not just paying attention to streamers and TikTok and short form content.
Well, they make the point to say, like, they may love short form content, but they're not talking about it with their friends. They're talking about traditional media. And that's really just because, look, traditional media is made to break the algorithm and appeal to the widest demographic possible, whereas your algorithm will tailor whatever weird shit you're watching. How many times on here do I mention some weird reel or something that I watch that nobody else will find funny but me, because my algorithm is tailored to whatever the heck it is that I watch. In fact, Olivia texted me. She says I follow the guy from the Cringe, the couple that made the Cringe video, and said that their stuff's hilarious.
Well, it's easier to talk to your friends about the movie that just came out than the reel that you saw the other day. Social experiences can still emerge from movie and TV consumption. 53% of young Americans discuss movies and TV shows with their friends more than they discuss the content that they watch on social media. Gen Z also shows a distinct preference for animation. The percentage of adolescents who prefer animated content over live action rose from 42% last year to 48.5% this year. And it wasn't just the younger teens. Nearly 48% of respondents from 19 to 24 also preferred animation, which they're probably referring mostly to anime there. But K-pop Demon Hunters is a great example of that. And I don't relate whatsoever. I'm always going to prefer live action over animation.
Well, I think it's just a generational thing. So my generation grew up with like animated movies that they would have loved to see made into live action. And then we started getting live action cinematic universes, and now everyone's like, okay, we're done with that. Can we go back to the...
But even as a kid, I much preferred watching live action TV shows and movies like on Disney Channel and Nick.
For instance, DC, you can talk all day about the Dark Knights and the high points of DC, but most people that are fans will tell you that, the heyday of DC was their animated movies and not necessarily their live action movies.
And then over the possibilities of playing video games or going to concerts, teens said that they would prefer to go see a new movie in theaters with their friends if cost weren't a factor. So evidently young people still want to go to the movies and share in the common experience with their friends and talk about what they watched, but they likely cannot afford to do that because movie tickets are outrageously expensive now. And they also, honestly, don't have driver's licenses, so they would have to get picked up or dropped off by their parents. That makes it even harder. 57% of respondents say that they watch traditional media more than older generations assume. And 80% of respondents said that they sometimes or most of the time or always watch TV shows and movies on YouTube or TikTok rather than on TV or in theaters, which seems to suggest that they're pirating the content, but they didn't outwardly say that. I also wanted to mention that Hollywood studios are digging to find what female audiences in general across age groups are interested in seeing in their media. And one example of that is a recent panel discussion called A Day for Unreasonable Conversation. And that featured Brittany Hugeboom, who runs EV Magazine. She was on one of the panels. It wasn't recorded. It was a private panel for filmmakers, studio heads, screenwriters, industry leaders to get insights on what to put on television and film in the upcoming year. And Brittany shared about her experience of being one of the speakers at this event. And she said that she got booed by the crowd. The people who showed up, to hear what people want to see on screen, they literally booed. That's how they feel about you. That's how they feel about your preferences for what you want to see on screen, because all of this is about their own narcissistic vanity projects and social agendas.
I did a video that I scrapped the other day on the strong independent woman trope and all that stuff. And basically my point was to show you a bunch of examples of characters who were not superheroes or action stars, and why I felt that those roles spoke to both men and women. I had a lot of pages of notes. It got very, very convoluted. I ended up scrapping it, but like I mentioned earlier in the show, one of the things that I mentioned was the character of Danny Santino in Necessary Roughness, which was on between 2011 and 2013. Wasn't a high-budget show. It was a USA Network show, which of course means that it was one of the greatest things ever made in the history of entertainment. Somebody right there will not catch my sarcasm. But the point of it being that in the show, she is, it even has some feminist tropes at the beginning. Her husband is a cheating bastard. He is. But here's the thing. There's also a myriad of other male characters who are not bastards, who treat her with respect. They conflict professionally, and it's done in a way that is very, very good. The majority of the show is her balancing this life of being like a therapist for a professional football team while raising kids and trying to now find a new, I guess, boyfriend or husband and try to find yourself lucky in love, which are themes that people can understand. Mm-hmm. And whether it's entertaining to this type of person at this panel or not, people resonate with the idea of a person in a professional world who has a lot of stress at her job, who's also trying to figure out where she fits into the world as a mother, as she tries to find love, which most people who are not insane understand. Wanting to be loved, wanting to settle down, wanting to move on from something traumatic that happened to you. And maybe it's just because it's almost like when you start thinking, like, now they're doing conferences to figure out how to do it. Does that make sense? Like when you were doing it before, you just knew how to do it. Now you're overthinking it.
Right.
And you've got too many rules in place, placed by far left lunatics who tell you that you're giving some type of, like, I don't know, birthing propaganda or something, but they could do it very easily. And all the examples that I gave one action star example and then two other examples. All of them went off the air between 2012 and 2014. And there is just something about that time period in the lead up to when Trump got elected, or even what Matt Walsh said about how at the end of 2008 was when the first iPhone came out and algorithms started creating where the content was coming from. The stuff made back then, the characters were more likable, the stories were more relatable. They seemed to be able to do it without thinking about it so hard, and they just can't seem to nail that down anymore.
They're self-important assholes who can't realize that even though their current formula fails over and over again, they're still not going to listen to the people they solicited for advice. The tweet that I think you were referencing, though, from Matt Walsh says, pop culture peaked from 2007 to 2008. He mentioned There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, Zodiac, Michael Clayton, Into the Wild, Superbad, The Assassination of Jesse James, all came out in 2007. And in 2008, The Dark Knight, The Wrestler, and Tropic Thunder. They were still making great children's movies at this time, too. Ratatouille and WALL-E. An absurd number of the greatest TV shows of all time were on the air. The Wire, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, The Office. That's arguably 5 of the 10 greatest shows ever made. It's been downhill since then. Now, I want to get back to Brittany Hugoboom's post. She said, I was the only panelist or speaker of A Day of Unreasonable Conversation that was met with audible groans and dagger eyes because I was speaking to the majority of the country, not to the room of Hollywood creatives and execs. I said that the Snow White movie flopped because young women, like the original character, dream of love and romance, not leading a tribe. Amongst speakers like Kamala Harris and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, it was clear I was the only speaker with more Christian values, which is fine, by the way. I welcome conversation and have never had issues standing up for what I believe. I could feel the energy in the room drop when I said progressive writers decided beauty was oppressive, having kids is oppressive, men suck and are toxic, but also try to compete with them. But if Hollywood wants to succeed, it has to stop clapping for itself and start listening to the rest of the country. Finally, we were asked if we could rewrite the definition of empowerment for the next generation, how would we define it and what would we put at the center? My answer, we should start by asking ourselves what exactly are we empowering women to do, because it should be to live happy, healthy, meaningful lives, and the data is clear. The happiest women in America are married, have children, practice faith, and hold more or less traditional values. Meanwhile, the cultural script, career obsession, sexual freedom, endless independence has left a generation of women anxious, medicated, and alone. Audiences are starving for female characters who embrace femininity. I want to see mothers, wives, homemakers portrayed as aspirational in television and film, good, strong marriages. And my message to women is embrace your femininity, be loving, be virtuous, cultivate beauty, get married, have kids, practice faith, pursue your dreams, but order your life towards something greater than yourself and prioritize what matters most. And unfortunately, this speech that she gave at the event was not broadcast anywhere, so we won't get to hear it. But the people who heard it in person responded with audible irritation at the message, even though they invited her to give them advice on what people want to see. They refused to listen. And similarly, when Gen Z repeatedly expresses their distaste for actual porn being on TV, they continue to feed it to them. Because really the tastes of the audience are irrelevant to Hollywood screenwriters and studios. And, oftentimes they are mandated to include graphic content in their shows and movies.
That has been going on for a very long time, since well before the rush of content that we see now.
They don't want to respond to the tastes of the audience. They want to make the tastes of the audience. And somehow it's still not working because, ultimately, we just reassert ourselves because we're the customer.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.